Good to see everybody tonight. There's a story that's told about a little boy, elementary school age, who was out in his front yard playing one day with a friend when a pretty little girl went walking by. And he stopped and watched her, and after she had passed by, he looked at his buddy and he said, whenever I stop hating girls, that's the one I'm going to stop hating first. So, something we look forward to, right? And I have been looking forward to tonight ever since last Thursday. We got off to a great start in week 1. And so many of you were here, and thank you for coming back. And then, of course, we've got a lot of new faces tonight, too. So I'm excited about that. And don't you like our new classroom? Thank you to Janet Moon and Jan Rice for setting this up for us tonight, and I think we feel so much closer together than we did last week, all spread out. Now, there's a couple of things I got to tell you, okay? Last Friday morning, I got a text message from my cousin Linda, who's right back there, and she said, I had a dream last night that when we came back for your second class, the room was half full of men. And actually, that kind of thing has happened to me before. With the kind of name that I have, which can really go both ways. I mean, this week I got a letter from Agape to Mr. Teddy Copeland. But one year I was on the lectureship at Faulkner University in Montgomery, and when I got to my classroom, there sat all these preachers in their suits. And of course, they cleared out in a hurry when they realized that the teacher was wearing his skirt. But the other thing was, on Saturday, I saw my Aunt Charlotte. And she said, I'm so sorry that I didn't come to your class Thursday night. She said my friend came, and she thought it was terrible, and she kept on talking, but I didn't hear anything after that, because you know how sensitive we women are. I thought, she thought it was terrible, it wasn't helpful, it wasn't good. But what she really said was she thought it was terrible that I didn't come and support you. Anyway, thank you for being here tonight and supporting not only me, but supporting Heritage Christian University. Okay, so last week, I'm going to have to remember to hold this. Last week, we introduced our series for this month with me telling you a story about something that happened when my kids were little and were playing a game of Uno. And you probably remember, if you were here, that I said they kept grabbing up the cards and shuffling and dealing again and again and again until finally everybody got a hand that they were satisfied with. Okay? And we talked about the fact that you can't do that in real life, can you? When we're dealt a difficult or an unpleasant hand, we can't say, well, I don't want this, take it away and give me something better. But instead, we have to learn to play the hand that we're dealt. Now, a few years ago, my husband and I had gone to Nashville to visit our son and daughter-in-law, and this was before they had any kids. And so they had rented a movie for us to watch that night. And so the guys were in the other room getting everything set up, and I was in the kitchen with my daughter-in-law, and she was telling me that she had made some cookies, but they had turned out too hard. And so she had said somebody had told her to put a piece of bread, an old stale piece of bread, in the container, and that would draw out the moisture and make the cookies soft. Well, I told her I had done that before with brown sugar, that had gotten too hard, but I'd never done it with cookies. So anyway, we went on into the next room and sat down and turned out the lights and started watching the movie and eating our cookies, okay? So the next day we're on our way home, and my husband says to me, what do you think about Laura's cookies? And I said, oh, well, I thought they were really good. And he said, well, I did too the first few I ate, but then did she have 2 different kinds? He said, I got one that was awful. It tasted like a stale old piece of bread. And he said, I had to eat it because I couldn't put it back in there. Well, Laura was so embarrassed when I told her the story later, because she said, I couldn't for the life of me figure out what had happened to that. So to paraphrase a line from the movie Forrest Gump, life is like a bowl of chocolate chip cookies. You never know what you're going to it. And in the case of my husband, and often we don't get what we want, and we may not even get what we were expecting, right? Okay, so a quick review. Last week I told you the story of a baseball pitcher who was on top of the world, had everything going for him, even had his picture on the cover of a magazine, okay? And then remember that somebody noticed the odd angle of his elbow, and that led to the bizarre discovery that he didn't have a UCL in his arm. And at that point, everything changed for him, didn't it? R.A. Dickey says, it was as if I had won the lottery and then lost the ticket. And we know the phrase, don't we, that life can turn on a dime. Have you ever heard that? One moment, and then nothing is ever the same again. It may be a phone call we get. It may be a diagnosis. It may be a policeman that shows up at our door. I'm pregnant, says your daughter. I'm leaving, says your spouse. It's cancer, says the doctor. And everything changes. We started out by looking at two passages of Scripture. The first one in James chapter 1 and verse 2. And remember that it says there that we're to count it all joy when we face various trials. But we emphasize the word there, when it happens. It doesn't say if you face trials, does it? It says when you face trial. And so the idea is it's inevitable. Sooner or later it's going to happen. Like we said last week, it's going to happen to everybody. The second passage is in Job chapter 14 and verse 1, where very matter-of-factly it says everybody that's born of woman, their life is going to be full of trouble. Doesn't say, oh, it could happen if you run into some bad luck, or it's possible, but it says life is full of trouble. Now, last week at the end of class, I asked those of you who felt comfortable with it to take just a minute and write down on a card. You didn't have to put your name, but just write down some of the difficulties that you're facing, some of the hard hands that you've been dealt. And I just want to say thank you to all the people who were willing to open up and do that. And if you, and that's going to really help me in preparing for our next couple of classes, because I want to talk about some of these specific problems. So if you didn't get a chance to do that last week and would like to, there are some cards available. And like I said, you don't have to put your name. But what I learned from reading through those cards, well, actually, I don't guess I learned it. What I was reminded of, because I think I already knew it, is the fact that there are a lot of people who are hurting in the world. And not just in the world, in this very room. I saw a book one time that had the title, In Every Pew, a Broken Heart. And you know, we might could adapt that line and say, in every chair, a broken heart, or at every table. Because we know that that's true. Some of us may be battling depression or loneliness. Some of us may be struggling with abuse. Some of us may be taking care of a loved one who doesn't even remember who we are. Some of us may be raising grandkids because our own children have lost their way. Some of us may have been rejected or betrayed by a spouse. Some of us may be going from doctor's appointment to doctor's appointment and still not being able to find a cause or a cure for constant pain. Hard things happen in life, don't they? Last quarter in our Sunday school class, the teacher was telling about an elderly couple at the congregation where he grew up. And he said they married when they were very young. And on the day of their ceremony, when they left the church building, not 5 miles down the road, they were involved in a horrific accident. And the woman, the bride, was permanently disabled. And so this man, this groom, has spent his whole life, their entire marriage, taking care of her. In fact, our teacher said that he even puts her makeup on and brings her to every church service. And I was amazed about that because I said I can imagine how I would look across the table. But if you've read my book, Playing the Hinterville, you also remember the story that I tell in there about my friend Gwen, who was on a camping trip with her family when she was 7 years old. And the lantern got knocked over and the tent caught fire and they thought everybody got out, but Gwen was trapped inside and ended up with third-degree burns on 85% of her body. And she's had more plastic surgeries than she can count, but she still has the kind of appearance that when she goes out in public, people always stare at her. At Our Lady's Day last Saturday at Stony Point, our speaker, Joyce Flynn, told about being one of 13 children in a family in South Africa. And her father died when he was only 31 years old. And as a 14-year-old girl, because her mother had just had a new baby, she was the one who had to go and make the funeral arrangements for her father. And they didn't have any money, so she had to barter and beg for them to be able to pay for it in payments. And then she had to quit school and get a job to take care of her family members. There's a blog that I read from time to time for women on the mission field. And missionaries are very near and dear to my heart because our family spent 6 years in Brazil in the 1980s, and 3 of our 4 children were born there. But a recent post on that blog broke my heart. It's about a woman whose family had recently returned to the States after spending long years as missionaries in Mongolia. And since they've been back, I want you just to listen to what they're facing. Her adult son had walked out and left his young family, a pregnant wife and a little boy, and so they've had to move in with this man and this woman. Her college-age daughter has been assaulted and is in the process of having to go to court and testify against her assailant. And then her high school daughter, with all the challenges of readjusting to life in high school in the States, along with the assault of her sister and the desertion of her older brother, had confessed to a friend that she was contemplating suicide. And listen to what this woman writes. These aren't the problems in a slum district of another nation. This isn't the suffering of the poor outside our gate overseas. This is my home, my family. We're the ones being discussed around dinner tables. The family you feel bad for, followed up with a sense of relief that it isn't your family. And then she goes on to say, how did this happen to us, Lord? Don't you care about your own reputation? If I wanted to inspire and mobilize other workers to go into all the world, I think I'd make sure that the veterans, the ones who have gone, turned out all shiny and perfect, people to be envied. But it doesn't work that way, does it? And I know I could go on and on. I could spend all of our class talking about case after case after case. But as they say in my husband's profession, I rest my case. And I know I don't have to convince you that bad things happen to people. Because as I said, many of you have experienced or are experiencing that yourself. So what do? Instead of focusing on all the broken hearts, I want us to ask ourselves the question, how do we deal? What do we do about it? As I said, next week we're going to look at some specific difficulties that were dealt. But what I want to do tonight is just remind you of where we can go to get the strength that we need to face these challenges in life, whatever it is that we're up against. The first one, of course, is obvious. Strength comes from the Father. Okay? We looked last week at the passage in 2 Corinthians that talks about the God of all comfort. And we talked about the fact that He comforts us so that we, in turn, can comfort other people, right? But tonight, as we talk about this part, I want to just dig a little deeper and talk about just what all He provides for us. You know, last week I mentioned Esther, and one of the things that you always hear about the book of Esther is that it's the only book in the Bible where God's name is not mentioned, okay? So there's you a good trivia question. If you ever want to stump anybody, just ask them that and they might not know. But several years ago, we studied Esther in our ladies' class at church, and I learned something then that I found fascinating. One of the commentaries said that although God's name is not in the book per se, that there are 4 instances in the book of Esther where God's name, the name Jehovah, is in an acrostic. Now you know what an acrostic is, right? Let's say we had the sentence, girls own denim, okay? The first letter of that phrase, those 3 letters, spell out God. Well, there are 4 verses in the book of Esther where the first letters of each of the words in that verse spell out the Hebrew name of Jehovah. And ladies, I think what we can learn from that is even when God's presence is not evident, that doesn't mean that He's not there. Let me give you another example. When our oldest daughter got married back in 2006, she wanted 2 of her cousins' little girls to be flower girls, even though they were only 2 years old, okay? And so that made for a very interesting photo shoot before the wedding. We were trying to get a shot of the entire wedding party. And one of the little girls, Lucy, did not want to get her picture made. And in her defense, her mama had just had a new baby and wasn't able to be there with her that day. And so there was a lot going on in her little world. Well, the photographers were great. They were so patient, and they worked with her, and boy, they just tried everything. And you know what they finally came up with that worked? They got my nephew Paul, Lucy's dad, to come up on the stage. He wasn't a part of the wedding party, but they got him to squat down behind my daughter, and the big full skirt of her dress hid him so that you couldn't see him. His presence wasn't visible, but because he was there and Lucy knew he was there, that made her feel secure. And I was looking at the pictures the other day. I won't exactly say that she smiled, but she did stop crying. So ladies, I think we need to remember that even when we may think, where is God? Even when it may appear that He is nowhere to be found, that He is still there and He can still provide strength for us. And what a loving Father He is. Indulge me a little bit. I know this is a blurry picture, but it's a picture of me and my daddy when I was 2 years old and we were going through Fat Man Squeeze in Chattanooga. And I love this picture. This summer I read a book called Girls Burn Brighter. And it was somewhat of a disturbing book. It was very violent in sections. And it just reminded me how in many places in the world, women are still mistreated, treated very poorly. But the part I liked about the book is the story of a very strong friendship between 2 young ladies in India. And they're very different. And in reading that book, I think part of the differences in their attitude toward life stems from the relationship that they had with their father. One of the young ladies is named Hermina, and she relates a story that happened to her when she was very little. She doesn't remember it, but she overheard her father telling his friend about it. Their family was eating a meal down by a lake, and she wandered away and got to the edge of the water and was about to go into the water. And this man told his friend, he said, I didn't go and get her right away. I hesitated because I thought to myself, well, she's just a girl. And of course, you have to realize this is a society where sons are valued, not daughters, okay? And a daughter, well, that's just somebody that's a nuisance because you have to provide a dowry to even get rid of her. Can you imagine knowing that that's how your father felt about you? Then there's the other young lady's name is Savitha. And her relationship with her father is totally different. I want to take a minute and read you the story that she tells, okay? She was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and her father was doing odd jobs. Some days he would take her along when her mother was busy cleaning. On this day, he was working for a rich family whose daughter was getting married. Her father's job was to make tiny sugar molds shaped like birds. Savitha had no idea what the birds, hardly bigger than her hand, would be used for. Decoration, her father told her, but how could they, she wondered, when they looked so tasty. She sat quietly and watched the pot and then the molds, hoping some of the sugar would dribble out. Her father had only been given a dozen molds, so the pot was left to simmer while they waited for each batch to harden. Once they sat, he carefully lifted out each of the white sugar birds, their wings outstretched, and placed them in the sun to dry. She wondered whether she could just lick maybe one without anybody noticing, but when she looked over, her father was watching. By now, he had made nearly 100. She sat hunched by the birds for some minutes when she heard her father gasp. His eyes grew wide when she turned to him. He pointed, look at that one. Its little wing is broken. She looked. There, one of the birds did have a wing that had broken off. She jumped up. What will we do? Will they make us pay for that one? Her father said, no, I don't think so, but we'd better eat it, just to be sure. Savitha thought about that statement, then she smiled. She laughed. I'll get the bird. She ran to the edge of the row and leaned over carefully. But she lost her footing and fell, crushing all but 1 or 2 of the birds beneath her. She lay there for a moment on the broken birds, her eyes flooded with tears. She knew she was in for a scolding, maybe even a beating, and what was more, her father was going to have to make all those birds again. She finally got up gingerly, her arms and legs and frock, and even her face studded with splintered pieces of sugar, her cheeks hot with tears. She was afraid to look at her father, afraid to raise her gaze. But when she did, to her surprise, he was laughing. His eyes were shining. She couldn't understand it. But you'll have to make them all over again. Her father still laughed. Now he pointed at her. And I thought you were sweet before, he said. It took her a moment to understand, and when she did, she flew into his arms. He laughed some more and hugged her close and lifted her off the ground. Forget those birds, he said. You girl of mine, you're the one with wings. That, ladies, is the kind of father that we have. One who loves us dearly. You know, it doesn't matter if we mess up because we're all going to, aren't we? But he doesn't punish us. He doesn't get frustrated with us. He doesn't cast us aside. He only takes us in his loving arms and tells us how much he cares for us. He does that when he's disappointed in us, and he does that when he knows we're hurting. That's how much he comforts us. And then, what a difference it makes when he is on our side. There's a book called In the Grip of Grace, and let me just share with you real quickly a story from that book. As youngsters, we neighborhood kids would play street football. The minute we got home from school, we'd drop the books and hit the pavement. The kid across the street had a dad with a great arm and a strong addiction to football. As soon as he'd pull in the driveway from work, we'd start yelling for him to come and play ball. He couldn't resist. Out of fairness, he'd always ask, which team is losing? Then he would join that team, which often happened to be my team. The difference he made in the huddle changed the whole game. He was confident, strong, and most of all, he had a plan. We'd circle around him, and he'd look at us and say, okay, boys, here's what we're going to do. The other side was groaning before we ever left the huddle. He brought new life to our team. God does precisely the same for us. Okay, so we talked last week about the verse that says God knows how many hairs we have on our head, but we said He also knows how many tears we've cried. But one thing that I didn't say when we were talking about that is that there is coming a time when He's going to wipe those tears away. If you'll look back in the book of Revelation, you'll see how there's going to come a time when He's going to restore everything to perfection, back the way it was in the beginning. In Revelation 21 and verse 1, it says, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. I saw the holy city coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband." I absolutely love that image. Without fail, my favorite part of any wedding is that moment when the traditional music starts to play, the doors are flung open, that mama stands up and turns around, and everybody around her follows suit. And here comes that precious young lady, all grown up, all decked out in that beautiful gown that her daddy's still paying for. At that moment, I don't care if it's your daughter or mine, that's when I start to bawl. But that's the beautiful image, the emotional scene that God uses to tell us that's what it's going to be like when eternity begins and when heaven starts. Paradise is going to be restored, and all the heartaches and the injustices of this earth where the devil rules, all of that will be past. And I know my friend Gwen, for one, can't wait to have that new body that it talks about. I've always gotten a kick out of a story that's told about Michael Reagan, son of former President Ronald Reagan. Supposedly when he was a little boy, he had 2 goldfish. You know what happens to goldfish, right? So one day he comes home and one of the fish is dead. And he is heartbroken, okay? And so his father is trying to comfort him, and so he tells him, he doesn't need to cry because his fish has gone to heaven, and he tells him what a beautiful place heaven is and how wonderful it's going to be and how it's so much better than anything even here on earth. And when he says that, Michael wipes his eyes and he says, "Well, Daddy, if that's the case, let's kill the other fish." But that is the case, ladies. Heaven is going to be worth it all, as we sing in the song. And as we sing in the other song, don't you want to go to that land? When we think about how wonderful it's going to be, I think we do. Okay, I got to hurry. Secondly, let me suggest that strength comes from Jesus. We have an older brother who knows what we're going through. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 14. Listen to what it says. Verse 15, I'm sorry. "For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin." I read an article recently about a time several years ago when the Queen of England came to the United States for a visit. And she went to Baltimore to a baseball game with President Bush. He was president at the time, and his wife, and the baseball commissioner. And she got to sit up in a VIP skybox, and she got to enjoy this pregame buffet of crab cakes and all these wonderful delicacies. And after 2 innings, she left. Well, could she say that she has experienced a baseball game? I guess. But has she had the real baseball experience? Not really, because not until you sit in the stands where you have to climb over 12 people to get to your seat, or 12 people have to climb over you to get to theirs, where somebody spills something on you or you spill something on somebody else. where you pay an exorbitant amount for a mere hot dog. I mean, that's the real experience of a baseball game, isn't it? Jesus had the real experience of life on this earth. He wasn't just up in a VIP box where he could sit down and look and kind of get an idea of what was going on. He was right down there in the action. He experienced all the things that we experience. Rejection. He suffered pain. He had people that he was close to disappoint him. I love to read about the accounts in the Gospels where Jesus goes to be baptized by John. Why did he do that? Have you ever thought about it? You know, he was sinless. He didn't need his sins washed away, did he? But he wanted to be numbered with the transgressors, as it talks about in Isaiah 53. He wanted to identify with us, and he did. He did in so many ways. He knows what we're going through. We do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize, because he certainly can. Okay, so next, whoops, there we go. Here's your verse. Next, strength also comes from the scriptures that the Spirit has inspired for us to have. And I'm going to mention just a few of these. The first one is the passage in John 9 that Kathy read for us. Thank you, my friend. This is one of the many miracles where Jesus healed somebody. It's the story of a man who was blind from birth. How horrible would that be? I mean, that's a difficult hand to be dealt, isn't it, for him and also for his family, okay? And in verse 2, I think it's real interesting that there was a very common idea in that time, and also in the time of Job, that if you suffered, then it was punishment for some sin that you had committed. But Jesus tells them that's not the case, right? But the part in this passage I really want to zero in on is in verse 6. Did you notice what Jesus used to heal that blind man? Mud. Made from dirt, yuck, and spit, double yuck. Okay. I can't help but be reminded of the time that one of my cousins mixed dirt and water and decided that he was going to tell some of our other cousins that it was a new flavor of Kool-Aid. That didn't go over very well. It was disgusting. But ladies, God can take the disgusting things in life and use them to help us see things clearer. That's what happened with this blind man. And that's what he can do with the hardships in our lives if we will let him. Another passage I want to look at, and I'm having a hard time juggling my glasses, the microphone, and the Bible. But hang on with me. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. This is so cool, I think. Notice it says, "In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ." What it's saying, ladies, is that as God allows Satan to attack us, and we talked about that last week, God doesn't cause these bad things, but sometimes he allows them to happen. But as he allows Satan to send us some of these terrible things, he turns around and uses them to make us stronger and to bless us. You know, Satan, I can just imagine he's saying, aha, I'm going to make this happen and they'll never get over it. That'll be the end of their faith. But that's not always how it works. God, if we let him, can use that difficulty and turn it into something good. One of my dear friends lost her husband probably about 12 years ago. And that same year, her daughter got engaged. And I'll be honest with you, she wasn't really excited about it, okay? But we don't get to choose who our kids marry, do we? But anyway, there was just something about this young man that bothered her. He was from a good family, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Well, about a year later, after they'd been married for almost a year, this young man was caught embezzling funds from his employer to support an addiction that he had. And fortunately for him, the employer was a member of the church, so he didn't press charges, and the young man went immediately to rehab, okay? But I can just imagine the devil was thinking, all right, I've got him now. This marriage won't last. These two families are going to be at odds with one another over this situation. But something beautiful happened. This young man came out of rehab, and he has become an unbelievable minister in this area. I don't mean a paid minister at church, but he has a ministry, and I can't tell you how many young people who have battled alcoholism or drug problems have been helped by this young man. They used something terrible that happened to them, and they turned it into something wonderful that they can use to help other people. One more passage I want us to see, and this is in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 and verse 6. And you became followers of us and of the Lord, having received the word in much affliction with joy of the Holy Spirit. When I read this verse, I can't help but think about a hotel that Roger and I stayed at one time. Now, we're not really high-end people. You know, we don't have to have the 5-star, the very best. We're pretty flexible. We've lived in third world country before. But this hotel, I got to tell you, left a lot to be desired, okay? Especially the shower. Because when you got in, for a minute, the water was like freezing cold, and then the next minute, it would be scorching hot, okay? One or the other, you know, we might could have adjusted, but it was the unpredictable combination of it that just left us squealing. Well, Roger would probably say the men don't squeal, but I was squealing, okay? But notice in this passage in 1 Thessalonians, affliction and joy, okay? There's that hot water, cold water combination that comes out of the daily spigot of life, okay? And I think only in Christ can these two things fit together, you know, in the same sentence, in the same verse, in the same line. I love the way that one modern translation puts it, taking the trouble with the joy and the joy with the trouble. And ladies, that's exactly what we're going to have to do. Because life has growth, doesn't it? Yeah, it has all this trouble that we've talked about, but there's a lot of joy in life too. And so what we have to do as God's people is take whatever it is that God deals us and learn from it and use it. I know that some of you are familiar with this little writing called Welcome to Holland. It was written in 1987 by a woman who had been asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability, a special needs child. But I want to read it with you now because I think that it's not limited to that situation. Wherever we land in life, whether it's where we hope to go or where we ended up, there is something good that can come from it. Let me just read this to you. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make your wonderful plans. The Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean, Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've dreamed They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a whole new group of people you would never have met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there a while and catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills, and Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned. And the pain of that will never, ever, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very, very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't go to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special and the very lovely things about Holland. And real quickly, one more. Strength also comes from each other. Now, brother-in-law preaches for the River Chase congregation in Birmingham, and there was an article in their bulletin several years ago written by the children's minister at the time. He's no longer with them. But I cut this out and put him in my files because I thought it was so good. He tells about going to a t-ball game, okay? And most of us have probably been to a t-ball game, either our children or our grandchildren. But I want you just to listen to what he says about it. He said, it was a team of 5-year-olds, and when we got there, they were having a great time. The reason I knew they were having a great time was because the right fielder was sitting in the grass, running his fingers on the ground, making truck sounds. The left fielder had his glove off his hand and on his head, and was trying to look at the sky through it. The second baseman was drawing smiley faces in the dirt on the infield. Suddenly, though, the ball was hit right up the middle, past the pitcher and past the second baseman in the center field. Well, the little second baseman came to attention and started chasing that ball into the outfield. The left and right fielders also stopped what they were doing and chased the ball into center field. But it didn't stop there. The first and third baseman chased the ball too. So did the pitcher and the catcher. In fact, all 11 players ran to the outfield to get the ball. And he says, now I know that there are only 9 players on the field, but 2 people came out of the dugout to go chase the ball. All of the players congregated around that ball in a huddle. After a few seconds, one player emerged with the ball in his glove and started running toward home. He was escorted by everyone on the field until every single player on that team was standing together on home plate. And he says, isn't that great? Now that's what you call a team, isn't it? And he ends it by saying, it reminds me of the blessing of being part of a body of believers. And ladies, when something happens, as it will, and you're hurting, I hope you have lots of sisters who will drop whatever they're doing and come running. Because what a blessing that is. I've got a little assignment. Jan and I talked a little bit about wanting to do something special where we can pray for each other. And so what I'd like for you to do is on one of those little white cards that should be at your table, and if not, you can raise your hand and we'll get you one. I like for every person, and you can put your first name if you want to, but you don't even have to put a name. But I want you to put something in your life that you need us to pray about, okay? And when we're done, I've got a little basket. And before you leave, you can, I'm sorry. Does anybody need a card? Before you leave, you can just, I'm going to put the basket right up here. You can just drop your card in this basket. Something that you would like to be prayed over, okay? And next week when we come to class, we're going to pass around the basket, and everybody's going to draw a card. And that means that somebody's going to be praying for you. Maybe not by name, but God knows, doesn't He? But they'll be praying for whatever it is that is a special need in your life that you would like to have a sister encourage you and give you comfort for. Let's close with a prayer. Will you bow your heads, please? Father, we want to thank you so much for the opportunity we have to come together tonight, and thank you for each one of these women who've taken the time out of a busy life to come and to think about you and to open your word. Father, we know that we have hard times in life. There are so many things that go wrong and that don't go the way that we want them to. But we just ask that you give us the strength to take whatever hand it is that has been given to us. Help us to look to you for our strength. Thank you for always being there and for being such a loving Father. Thank you for Jesus and for the fact that we know He understands whatever it is we're going through because He has been here and lived on this earth. Thank you that the Spirit has given us your word so that we have all of these passages that we can lay on our heart and that we can go back to and that we can look to and see the things that you would have us to know to help us during these hard times. And then, Father, we just want to thank you for giving us one another, that we don't have to walk this walk on the earth alone, but that we have Christians around us, and especially that we have Christian sisters that we can open up our hearts and we can share the hardships with. Father, you know the burden that each lady in this class is bearing tonight, and I want to ask that you just give a special measure of comfort and of strength for each situation, and help us always to remember, Lord, never to try to solve our problems on our own, but to always give them to you and trust you to take care of us. Father, we pray all of these things tonight in the name of your precious Son and our Savior, Jesus.